Hi everyone, welcome back to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories. This is episode 103, and my guest this week is returning for her second appearance to bring us up to date on what is happening on her healing journey. McDonald is joining us for a remarkable interview that you won't want to miss. Before we get started though, I want to announce that I have just launched a new Instagram account that goes by the same name as this show, Sexual Assault Survivor Stories. I'm looking to use this Instagram platform to further help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. Go to @Sexual Assault Survivor Stories on Instagram and hit that follow button to stay updated with exclusive content, behind the scenes peeks, and more. Then spread the word. Share my page with everyone you know, friends, family, and anyone who might be interested. Every follow counts. Thanks for supporting this effort. Now, back to the show. Here's Mac. McDonald, thank you for joining me. It's great to have this opportunity.
Thank you for having me again.
Just so my audience knows, McDonald was one of 4 people who were on a panel during a summit that I attended at the invitation of the New York State Police in upstate New York. And I presented in the morning for 4 hours, and this panel, McDonald and the other 3 people, presented in the afternoon. And they happened to have been in the audience during my presentation in the morning, and I was so intrigued by the whole idea of listening to a panel of women who had been sexually assaulted or raped that I stuck around. And after that, all 4 of them came up to me and asked me if I was doing the type of training that I had done that morning, specifically for victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. And I said, no, I can't say that I have. And all 4 of them said, you need to start a podcast. And I'll be real honest and transparent. McDonald and those other 3 are why this podcast exists, because it was them that gave me the courage to do this. So I made them promise that each one of them would be a guest on the show, and they all said, of course, we'll do that. And they did. They followed through. So if you want to go back to my early episodes and hear McDonald, like I said, she was number 7. And we had talked clear back then about her coming back on the show. And finally, we have this opportunity. So, Mac, thank you so much. I'm going to quit talking and let you talk. This is a follow-up episode. So, Mac, what are you able to tell us about how things have been since last time we talked?
So a lot has happened. I don't quite remember if I was fresh out of treatment. I think that I went back to treatment for an eating disorder after we talked. And I've been out of treatment now for going on like 7 months. I'm really proud of myself for how far I've come. There are still days that are tough. There are still behaviors that I'm using. My eating disorder is definitely not in the past. It's something that I still struggle with today. And it's something that my therapist and I are working on. It's a daily struggle, but I'm trying my best to work through it. And my therapist keeps reminding me that I'm going through a lot and I'm dealing with a lot right now. So using behaviors is kind of expected at this moment. So I'm trying to give myself grace and understanding for all the behaviors that I'm currently using.
Mac, I love hearing that. And I have to tell you, I am so in awe, in admiration of you for being so forthright and so honest and transparent about not only clear back when we first recorded and about your rape, but also everything that you've been gone through. You've just been stellar and a great example, I think, for others who may be struggling with some of the same mental health issues, the eating disorder, the rape, and there's probably a whole lot more that I'm not even aware of. But I just think the fact that you are willing to talk about it is so admirable and commendable. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. Tell us more. What's going on with Mac?
I have been dealing a lot with my trauma. There's a lot of trauma that I did not know that I had. I've been talking about it in both. I have 2 different therapists. It's something that we both have been tackling. Like they both have been tackling it. Not only was the assault, there was the sexual harassment that I dealt with, and then there was another sexual assault that I had when I was a kid. So there's 3 different sexual traumas that I have on top of the childhood trauma that I have from just childhood stuff. Honestly, it brings up a lot of different thoughts and behaviors that I'm not too proud of, but also can't be mad at myself for, because when I was a kid, there had to be a way for me to cope, right? So I came up with the best way I knew how in the moment because I didn't have skills at the time. And I wasn't in therapy, so I didn't learn any of these coping skills. So I came up with my own coping skills, and they were maladaptive. Those are the behaviors that I'm still struggling with because it was what I learned when I was younger, and now I'm trying to unlearn all of these maladaptive coping skills that I've kind of adapted into my life. The eating disorder is a maladaptive coping skill or something that I've been using to cope with everything that I've dealt with. When I was younger, it was a way to escape from all of the trauma that I had. I now am trying to find other ways to deal with it. And honestly, talking about my trauma in therapy is really helping. It does bring up a lot of things. When I leave session, a lot of the times I spiral, and that's really difficult because now I'm on my own and I don't have a therapist with me to help me through the spiral. But I've learned that there's other ways for me to kind of reach out for help, and I have friends that I've been leaning on a lot. I reached out to Ellie and Sam and Jennifer. I reached out to them a couple of times, been with them. I went to Denver, New Hampshire recently, and I got a portrait done of myself. That was really, really fun. Samantha was actually the first person to do it and then told us about it. So Ellie and I both did it this time. So I got to see Ellie when I went.
Nice.
It was really, really, really cool. The person who did it, her name is Danielle. She came down to New York and took a picture of me, and we actually did it in the library because the library is my safe place. And I really, really love libraries. Books are an escape for me. I have 2 books. I have my Kindle and my book with me all the time, no matter where I'm going. Sometimes my friends are like, "You actually bring your Kindle?" And I go, "Yeah, honestly, I am. It's my thing, I guess." I did it in a library. It was so cool. I did it in a sweatshirt and a pair of jeans. It was so cool to see the finished product because she did it on denim. The pants were denim, so she didn't paint the pants, but the sweatshirt she had to paint on. My face she had to paint. The books behind me she had to paint. And it was incredible to see this finished product of this picture that she had taken of me, and now it's this portrait of me that she painted, and it blows my mind every time I see it because it's incredible. And to meet other survivors was also really incredible. And I'm actually going back in September to Boston this time, and there's another gala that I'm going to, and I'm going to see Samantha and her baby there. Cool. I'm very excited because I haven't met the baby yet.
Yeah.
I'm excited to meet the baby. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
And I get to see everybody that I met there. I get to see Danielle again. I get to see some of the other portrait recipients, and we get to hang out again for another day. And I get to go walk around Boston, which is pretty cool. I haven't been to Boston in a really long time, so that will be really cool. Also, I recently found out that my rapist raped a child. So that is something that I've had to deal with on my own and deal with in therapy. A lot of blaming myself and feeling like if I had went to the police when I was assaulted, that wouldn't have happened because he may have gotten arrested. He may have gone to jail. There was no opportunity for that. At the same time, I did what was best for me at the time because I hadn't fully come to terms with the fact that I was assaulted. I didn't know I was assaulted. I didn't know what coercion was at the time. And when I would tell people about some of the details, they would just be like, "Well, you just lost your virginity in a bathroom. Why?" It took me a long time to process what had happened to me and kind of come to terms with it. So I can't be mad at myself for the behaviors of my rapist. I can't take on what my rapist ended up deciding to do. He raped someone, and that was his choice. He raped again, that was his choice. And now he's probably going to prison. That was his choice when he raped a child, he made that decision for himself. It was a kid under the age of 12. So that is an additional charge, I believe, because I think so in New York. I'm not exactly sure, but I know that if they're under a certain age, then it's made worse. That is something that I found out and was very upset about and was talking to my therapist about. I took probably 2 weeks to process that because I very much internalized it. I don't think I've fully come to terms with it. I don't think I've fully processed that information yet because then we're going to go back down to self blame. And I just don't really want to go there right now. I've been dealing with a lot on my own anyway. And I just don't really want to process that. My rapist made his decisions, and I have to come to terms with that. I couldn't have changed the outcome for this kid, and that's very unfortunate. And I feel terrible for what happened to her because I know what it feels like. I couldn't have stopped him from doing that. That was his decision.
Mac, I am so sorry for the experience that you had of finding out about that and taking on some of that self-blame and responsibility. And I know you know this because you've just said it, that what happened to that 12-year-old girl is not your fault and you are not responsible. And I'm glad you recognize that. But I also understand that processing, that working out those words is easier said than done. And so I just extend my deepest empathy and compassion to you for what you're going through in learning that, but also commend you for making those realizations verbally and hope that you do well in processing through that because I know it's hard. Can we talk a little bit about that spiral sensation, that downward trend that you go into sometimes and what you do to handle that? What are your coping mechanisms? Are you willing to share that with us?
Yeah, so the spirals are just racing thoughts that won't stop. No matter what I do, I just keep going back to these same thoughts. And usually they're self destructive thoughts of you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And I will spiral for hours and sometimes days because I haven't been able to get myself out of them. It usually takes a therapist to get me out of them. When I go into sessions, I can be like, I've been spiraling for the last 3 days. Can we figure something out? Because I am tired of this spiral. And it's typically the same spirals over and over and over again, which becomes very frustrating at that point because it's like, we've done this before. I'm done dealing with it now. The coping skills that I've come up with for myself, at least, are distractions. So typically, I'll try to read a book. I will put ice. Ice is a very big skill for me that I've been using a lot. So, ice on my wrist, ice on the back of my neck, ice pretty much anywhere helps me because it snaps me out of whatever I'm feeling. I've also noticed that because I wasn't taking my ADHD medications, the spirals were worse. So once I got on my medications, it kind of helped because the thought patterns had changed because I wasn't constantly just thinking and thinking and thinking. It slowed my brain down so that I'm not spiraling as often. I still spiral, but it's not as bad as it used to because I wasn't on my medications. I also find going out into public really helps. Being in my house is not always the best because it gives me more chances to think, gives me more chances to spiral because I'm alone with my own thoughts. Mm-hmm. That's not very helpful for me. So I will go to Barnes and Noble and I'll just sit and read in Barnes and Noble. I will bring my Kindle and I'll just read. Or sometimes I just people watch, honestly. Like I will just sit and watch people and see what they're doing. It's very entertaining, honestly. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people there are studying, a lot of students, a lot of people doing work. So I'll just watch them, observe. A lot of children come, so then I'll just watch them play because watching children be joyful it warms my heart. I just like seeing kids being kids because that's what they should be doing. They should be having fun. They should be able to have fun and have joy. because that's what childhood is. It's supposed to be like that. So I love being able to watch kids be kids and just have fun. I'm trying to think of more. 5 4 3 2 1. I've mentioned this before. Still can't remember exactly what it is. I think it's 5 things you can see, 4 things that you can touch, something like that. I should really know that one because I sometimes use it, but I think I'm sometimes switch which sense I'm doing 5 4 and so I really should pat that one down.
I'm not sure it even matters whether
Also,
it's 5 things you smell, 5 things you touch, 5 things you hear. I think just counting down from anything and using those sensory perceptions is an extremely helpful and beneficial route.
mm-hmm. I find that very I don't it doesn't matter to me which one is what as
Yeah.
long as I'm doing something and it kind of gives me something else to focus on because if I'm focusing only on my thoughts I can't get out of my thoughts. Focusing on something other than my thoughts is really helpful.
Yeah.
If I'm spiraling, sometimes I'll call one of my friends or I'll text one of my friends and be like, hey, I'm spiraling. And they ask me what they can do. And sometimes in that moment, I don't know what I need. I don't know what would help. Sometimes I just say I need a distraction. So they'll play a game with me on my phone. I have an iPhone and you can play games with people on your phone. So I'll do that. Or they'll call me and we'll just talk for a couple of hours or an hour or whatever. That really helps. Just having people in my corner is really helpful. If it gets too bad, I'll text 988, I'll text 741 or I'll even text my therapist if it's really, really bad. My therapist don't always get back to me that same night, which I understand they have lives. So if they can reach out to me, they will. That helps because they'll sometimes I've been able to get in and have like an extra session with one of my therapists to kind of get me out of that spiral. Sometimes I just need that extra support, so I'll get in an extra session with my therapist, and that will really help. But I think the biggest thing I can do is advocate for myself and talking to my therapist and being able to tell them, hey, it's a rough day today. I'm not doing so hot. Then they can help me in the best way for me in that moment. And sometimes I need one thing, sometimes I need something else, but always just advocating for myself. And I'm not always the best at that.
Mac, I think it's also worth pointing out that all of what you've said are things that I know are going to help my audience who may be going through some of the same experiences. Yes, everybody's traumas, everybody's reactions to those traumas are different and distinct and separate, but there's so many commonalities. So when you talk about your coping mechanisms and the things that you do to help get you out of spiral, I know people in my audience can pick up on those also and will use those to be helpful. So I'm so appreciative that you were willing to talk about those. The other thing I think is really interesting about what you said earlier is showing yourself compassion. I'm wondering if you would be willing to talk a little bit more about that. What's that look like? What's that feel like? And what are the steps that you take to advocate for yourself and show that compassion? If you could talk about that a little bit, I think my audience would love to hear that also.
Self compassion is something that I'm actively working on. There's a lot of times when I have told my therapist that I don't like myself and that I'm too traumatized and I have too much trauma and I feel like that it's too much. It's hard for me to realize that I didn't choose this. I didn't deserve this. Nothing that I did warranted what happened to me. That is something that I am working through and working on. Not very far into it right at the moment, but it is something that I'm working on. There are a lot of core beliefs that I have that are deep rooted and deep seated in me that make it hard for me to sometimes see myself as a person that deserves compassion. That doesn't mean that I don't, though. I still deserve good things. I still deserve compassion. I still deserve to eat food. I still deserve to breathe air. I still deserve to sleep. I still deserve to have friends and connections and people in my corner and good things. I deserve my dog. I deserve the things that I love to do because I'm a human being and every human being deserves good things. Just for existing, you deserve good things. I can say that about other people. Sometimes I don't believe it for myself. So, um, I'm pretty sure that's a common thing with trauma. I also have to realize that this is not an uncommon thought pattern. I hear all the time from my therapist, you don't know how many times I heard that, or you're not the first person to tell me this, or something along those lines, because I'm sure that they hear it all of the time. I am working through feeling like I deserve punishment for everything that happens to me or that I did. It is something that is deep seated and deep rooted. I can be compassionate towards myself sometimes, but not always. My therapist is, both of my therapists are great and both know this about me. And I have told them, expressed to them how I feel about myself. So whenever I say something negative or not so nice about myself, I'm always trying to appraise it. And that's something I learned in treatment for my eating disorder. When I would say something that was either eating disorder related or something that was negative about myself or negative about something in general, somebody would always be like, you have to reappraise the thought. And it's about changing the thought pattern and rewiring that part of your brain that is constantly negative and trying to kind of change that. It takes time. So
Yeah.
it's something that I'm still struggling with. But I think hearing when I was in treatment, hearing reappraise that thought was really helpful because I sometimes didn't realize what I was saying or that it was negative. Because sometimes I also joke. I'm like, oh my God, like clumsy Mac. Reappraise. Okay. Everybody falls down sometimes. Not everybody can stay on their feet at all times. Like, it's fine. Everybody falls. It changes the thought pattern. It changes that. It rewires that part of your brain. So that is something working on. Then sometimes I hear it in my head, like reappraise that thought. So then I'm trying to rewire that part of my brain.
Yeah. That is such good stuff. I really appreciate you sharing that. It goes to the whole thing about understanding what your brain does and how it is wired and how neuropaths and synapse and all of those signals work. You're absolutely right. You get stuck in these old patterns, and some of those neuropaths are like deep ruts, and we get stuck in them. And the thing that I like about what you said is that they are changeable, and that if you work on it, there is such a thing as plasticity, and the idea of rewiring and rerouting those thought processes. I'm glad you said it because it's why I wanted you here, is to talk to other victims and survivors who may be going through some of those same things. And I know this is going to help others who are listening in. Mac, I just am super impressed with you. I love having you here and talking with you about this stuff because in my mind, all those negative thoughts have no place at all in who I see and who I talk to and who I know in my heart about who Mac is. I know so much about how you've reached out to others and how you help Jennifer and Sam and Ellie. You mentioned it last episode that you were on, that there's this sisterhood and camaraderie between the four of you. It's not something you would wish for anybody, but it's there, and you help each other through all of your things, and you've reached out to them. So I think there's so much to be said about having that support system and people in your life and helping them. Helping others is helping yourself. So that's who I know Mac is.
Thank you. I feel like other people have a different perception of who I am than how I have of myself. A lot of the work that I'm doing is trying to see myself as other people see me. I think that I'm very negative about myself and I have a lot of negative self-talk. Eating disorder, not helpful for the positive. So trying to ignore the eating disorder, ignore that part because the eating disorder thoughts are very loud and can be very, very intriguing to engage with. So the more you engage with them, the louder they become and the more you go into them, which you hear all these negative things about yourself. 24/7 when you have an eating disorder. That's not helpful. And then you have the depression that's talking to you, and that's feeding you negative self-talk. Then you have the trauma that's feeding you negative self-talk. So all of these mental health things are just feeding you this negative self-image that you kind of adapt for yourself. I'm trying to separate myself from those and not let them become who I am. I'm not my mental health. I'm not my depression. I'm not my PTSD. I'm not my anxiety. I'm not my depression. There's more to me than that. There's way more to me that's way more interesting than that. I just need to find that part of me because the negative self-talk is sometimes very loud and sometimes very intricate. But I know that there's more to me than that. I am wonderful with children. I love children. Every single day when I walk into work, there are kids that will stand at the window, and if they see me in the window, they'll be screaming Mac at the window. And then when I walk into the room, they'll yell Mac and then run up to me and give me a huge hug. Every day. It happens all the time with the toddlers specifically. Like all the toddlers seem to run up to me and give me a hug and yell my name, which I think is very funny. I love toddlers. I want to see myself the way they see me because they have a better perception of me than I do. And they love me and I love them. So
it's such a great position to work in a daycare then. You found the job for sure. I think drawing on that love, that admiration is so important. You're right. It's a great path to go down is to see yourself the way they see you because it's innocent and pure.
But kids can be brutal. They can be brutally honest. So they will tell you things about yourself that you're like, I already knew that, but thank you for pointing that out. They point out the funniest thing. One of my kids, I'm left-handed, and they made a comment about me being left-handed, and I was like, oh, I didn't, what? It was like, I don't even remember the comment, but it was so funny. I wrote it up on the board, and I think that in their mind, they have never really interacted with a left-handed person because most of the population is right-handed. So when they see someone who's left-handed, they're like, oh, that's interesting. I want to go back to that mindset where everything is just, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
This would be great.
You're right. They can be brutally honest and it can sometimes hurt, but I think the thing to remember in all of that is how it's delivered. And a lot of times with children, it's just innocent observation, no malintent, no maliciousness. It's just them learning what it is to observe and see differences in people.
It's always so innocent. And that's what I love about kids is they never do it to hurt your feelings. They're doing it because they're innocent children.
Right.
And I want to see little Mac as an innocent child. So we're working on, because Mac was an innocent child at one point who didn't deserve anything that happened to them. So,
Mac, it sounds like you have amazing therapists, and I'm thankful for that. It's awesome. Are you able to talk to us about how trauma recovery isn't linear and there are good days and bad days, but even on the bad days, those bad days are learning opportunities?
I definitely agree with that. Just like my eating disorder recovery is not linear, there are going to be days that I struggle more with restriction, and there are going to be some days that I am following my meal plan perfectly. There are days when I am really hypervigilant. I'm really struggling with dissociation. I'm really on edge, can't really focus on anything, especially if I'm in public. Anything can really set me off some days. And some days I'm perfectly fine. Like some days I'm able to go to concerts and be perfectly fine. And some days I can't. Some days loud noises are just too much for me. On those days, the days that it's too much for me, I take that as, okay, it's too much for me right now. But that doesn't mean it won't be too much for me the next time. Like I can go to another concert and maybe that day it will be fine. I also have bought loop earplugs for those days that are too much. Where if the noise is too much, if everything is too much, I just pop those into my ears and now the noise isn't too much. I can manage. So I've learned that There are days when I might not need them. I'm okay. And there's some days that I really need them. The noise is too much. I can't handle it, and I have to use them. Same. I've gone out with my friends to the bar a couple of times. Sometimes I'm okay, and I don't need that extra ear support because it's noisy, but I can manage. There are other times, and there's a couple of times when I've had to put the loops in because the noise was too much and I was dissociating and I didn't really want to. So those days, maybe I go outside, take a break. Maybe I just outright go, I can't handle this right now. I just gotta leave. That's okay. I can come back into the bar at some point if I need to, if I want to. Maybe I just have to leave at that point. But it's not the same every day. And sometimes I'm able to handle it and sometimes I'm not. And I have to just be where I am. I can't beat myself up for the noise being too much. I can't beat myself up for dissociating. I can't beat myself up for having a trauma response. My body is reacting however it knows how to protect me in that moment. What I can do, how I can handle it, is what I can like. I can control how I'm dealing with it. So it is bringing loops with me. It is maybe asking for ice at the bar if I'm at a bar. Maybe it is just leaving. But it's definitely not. I've talked about my trauma. I went to trauma. I went to therapy yesterday. I talked about some of my trauma with my therapist. Okay, that done with that trauma. It's gone forever. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
It's still there. It's always going to be there. It's just how I've learned how to deal with it. It's just learning. That's why EMDR is a thing. Like learning how to cope with it, learning how to desensitize yourself to it, and that doesn't come in a day. It takes a while. It's learning coping skills to deal with it the best way that you know how.
Mm-hmm.
Not a linear process though. And I wish it was. I wish it was just uphill, young gung ho, you're cured. But that's not how it works,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
So many of my guests and other people that I know who are healing from trauma, myself included, have said that talking about their trauma, getting it out there, was a grand and great step in the healing process. And you, since we've started talking this evening, have been so transparent and raw and honest. Do you too find that talking about it is more therapeutic and healing than it is damaging?
I do. I definitely do. I think that if I can help someone, I think that that is healing for me. So I tell my story to help others, and that helps me in turn. I think that also being able to get it out there so I'm not internalizing it anymore is very helpful as well because there's a lot of things that I've been internalizing and stuffing things down inside for too long. It's just all going to come up eventually. You can't keep stuffing things down. There's no, so it's all going to come up eventually. I feel that being able to talk about it, being able to process it, being able to do things like this is very therapeutic to me. Being able to have my portrait done and meet other survivors, that's incredible. That's an
Yeah.
amazing opportunity that not a lot of people get. So I feel like that is very helpful for me. And I'm very grateful for everything that I've been able to do because I do feel like I'm helping myself and also in turn helping others as well.
Yeah. 100% I agree with that. But I wanted your take on that. And I think you articulated that so well in terms of what it does. I also think it enlightens and educates others who may have no idea what trauma feels like. Yeah, we all experience trauma to some degree. But if you haven't been raped or sexually assaulted, if you don't have some traumas in your childhood that you dealt with, like so many of us have, but there are some who were fortunate enough not to have some of those childhood traumas. And I think educating people and talking about this is such a crucial component of changing society. And one of my, I think this is a trauma response in and of itself, is my anger and frustration with those who don't understand that we live in a culture that I call a rape culture, where we as a society glorify in movies, in television shows, in even our current court system.
I feel like it perpetuates this narrative that it's not that bad, or for me, it's like, oh, well, at least you weren't murdered. Like, okay, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And at least this didn't happen to you, or
it minimizes it. Yeah. And diminishes and puts the blame on the victims and survivors instead of on the perpetrators where it belongs.
right. Definitely with comments like, what were you wearing? How much did you drink? Things like that perpetuate this narrative that it's the victim's fault.
Yeah.
Recently, I don't know if you heard about this or knew about this, but Mariska Hargitay, who plays Olivia Benson in Law and Order SVU, recently came out about a sexual assault that happened when she was in her 30s, and she's in her 60s now.
Yep.
30 years it took her to come forward about her assault. And she was playing a police officer that deals with sexual assault every day.
Right.
TV. Like, to me, that just shows how much of a rape culture is around.
Absolutely. And for the audience that doesn't know, it's not uncommon for victims to not report or not talk about their rape or sexual assault for years. I was reading a statistic that somebody said in an email that I was reading recently, that most rapes or sex assaults in our society happen to younger people, like between 19 and 25, but they don't report that until in their 50s. So we're talking exactly the time frame that you're talking about, like 30 years or more before people start talking about it. It's a long time to process and hold back a horrific trauma that alters a person's life. And yet, because of the societal norms and stereotypes and the taboo that goes with rape and sexual assault, we're just taught not to talk about it.
There was a TikTok trend going around not too long ago, maybe like a month ago or a little bit longer than that, maybe. That was, would you rather be in the woods with a bear or a man? Right. And most people chose a bear. And then men got mad, asking, why would you rather be in the woods with a bear? A bear could kill you. But what men, or not all men, don't say that, what a lot of men don't understand is a lot of women, a lot of people are afraid of men because of the things that happen. You hear stories every single day about a man killing a woman, a man raping somebody, a man doing horrendous things. And then they wonder why we'd rather choose a bear over a man.
Even the catcalling and the come to be known as boys will be boys. It's extremely degrading and offensive. And all of that is cumulative. It just builds up in the targets that are absorbing these horrific behaviors. Yeah, you're right. It's no wonder that the majority of women would say, yeah, I'd rather be in the woods with a bear.
Most people know how to defend themselves against a bear. Most people know, like, if it's this kind of bear, this is what you do. If people know that. But with men, it's not known. You don't know what you have to do to defend yourself. So yeah, we're going to choose a bear over a man. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And the fact that we have to have a thing called the red zone, where rape is so common in college that they have a thing that is labeled as the red zone. This is when a lot of rapes happen, where it's between August and November of like college, the beginning of the year. That's when a lot of rapes happen on campuses.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's when I was raped in technically the red zone, my freshman year of college. It is so common that they have a thing that they label it as. It's so common that Joe Biden started a whole campaign, it's on us, to end rape on college campuses. Like, This is a whole thing that happened because they realized how prevalent sexual assault is on college campuses.
Yeah.
So common that schools are under investigation. Like, that blows my mind. And some schools are under multiple investigations.
Yeah.
It's not just one investigation. I think some schools are under like 7 investigations. It's insane to me that this is so prevalent that people still just don't understand it.
Right. It is critical that we have these kinds of conversations, not only for the victim and survivor community, but like I said earlier, to those who haven't experienced rape or sexual assault or severe trauma, to educate them on what it is, how it impacts a victim's and survivor's life in almost every aspect. These dialogues that we're having on this show are so important. We need to normalize these conversations, and we need to increase the frequency of how often we talk about these things, make people aware. We need to make these conversations common and normal and frequent. I think when we as a society can freely talk in the open about rape, sexual assault, impact, responsibility, then the core of the problem can be addressed and we can start to make changes. And that's why I'm so appreciative of you, Mac, is that having you here is part of that process. When I brought this up to you the other day, the possibility of having you back on again, and you were like, yes. I mean, you didn't hesitate at all. That is so commendable, and I appreciate you. I don't want to wait as long next time. I want to have you on again sooner. So are you willing to maybe come back again and bring us up to date on where you're at, like in 6 months or so?
Absolutely. I think that this is very helpful and another episode for my therapist to listen to. So that's great. I think it's good for me to be able to freely talk about this. It also gives me an opportunity to talk about things that maybe I'm not always the most comfortable talking about in other places. I feel comfortable with you, so I'm able to talk to you more openly and more freely. Sometimes it's harder for me to talk about this kind of stuff. So then I can just send this to my therapist and be like, here you go. Then they can listen to this, and then it's really helpful.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome. Glad I could be of help. I think one of the things you just said is that how helpful this is, not only to you, and I've mentioned a couple of times now that it's helpful to my audience, but that looking forward to something as significant as this interview process can also be therapeutic. Oh, I'm going to talk to Dave about that. And I've had some of my guests say that they heard an episode and they weren't going to reach out to me to ask if they could, but because of something somebody said, it was the catalyst, it was the activator that made them say, yeah, I need to talk to Dave because I want to talk about how that impacted me. So I think the fact that you're willing to look forward to being on here again, and the fact that you understand and recognize that it is helpful to other people is a great aspect of what healing is all about. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that you said that you feel safe and comfortable talking to me. That's the whole platform that this podcast, Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, is supposed to be. It's a safe place to say whatever you want and not be judged, that you'll be understood. And even if it doesn't come across in a way that is understandable, we can have a discussion until it is. And we can talk about things in such a safe and open manner that this is a therapeutic platform. I'm thankful that you look at it that way. I'm glad it helps.
Yes. I really appreciate it.
Because you're helping other people too, as we've said.
I really hope so. I hope that my story has touched somebody. I know I'm not the only one that's experienced what I've experienced. Maybe not in the same way, but there's other people who have been assaulted on college campuses and didn't report, or did report and it didn't go well, or whatever the case may be. And so I want them to know that they're not alone and that there are other people out there that have experienced something similar to them. It can be very isolating to feel like they're the only one.
Absolutely right. Thank you for saying all of that.
Mm-hmm.
You are an amazing, powerful person, and I'm thankful that you were willing to be on the show. Not only willing, but anxious to be on the show. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Mac, let's stay in touch. We'll see if we can make this happen again.
Thank you.
Thank you. That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. A huge shout out goes to Mac McDonald for being willing to come back and share her raw, transparent look at her healing journey. Mac, you are nothing short of fantastic. Thank you for giving us this close-up view of all the work that you're doing and how life is progressing for you on this journey. We're all looking forward to your next update. I also want to remind each of you in the audience to help further this mission of normalizing the conversation about the prevalence of rape and sexual assault by following my new account on Instagram at Sexual Assault Survivor Stories. Please check out that page and be sure to hit the follow button. It's the numbers that count on this endeavor, so please hit the follow button. Then share the page with all of your followers and ask them to follow at Sexual Assault Survivor Stories. It may seem like a lofty and impossible idea, but I've set the goal at 500,000 followers by the end of October. If all of you hit the follow button and then tell all of your followers to do the same, this is more than possible. Hey, SAS listeners, I appreciate your help in this important mission. Tune in again next Tuesday for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories. In the meantime, help do your part to bring justice to victims and survivors by subscribing to this show, following at Sexual Assault Survivor Stories on Instagram, and of course, as always, start by believing, because we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.